In this documentary journey, you will step inside the silent world of a medieval monastery, discovering what daily life demanded, what discipline shaped the brothers, and what hidden struggles defined a monk's existence. Through ritual, sacrifice, fear, and devotion, you will learn what it truly meant to surrender your life to the cloister. During the High Middle Ages, across the lands of Western and Central Europe, monasteries stood as islands of order in a world fractured by war, famine, and uncertainty. Guided by strict rules, such as the rule of Saint Benedict, monastic life demanded obedience, poverty, humility, and silence. To become a monk was not simply to choose a profession, it was to enter a total, lifelong system of discipline meant to reshape the soul. Your journey begins with a threshold few ever cross. Upon arrival at the monastery gate, you were considered an outsider. Brothers observed you for weeks, testing your resolve. You surrendered your clothes, your possessions, even your name, receiving a coarse wool habit and a hood meant to erase your former identity. The novice master questioned you repeatedly. Do you understand the cost? Do you renounce the world? Once you stepped inside, the gate closed behind you like a final judgment. The ceremony was simple but deeply psychological. You lay prostrate on cold stone while the community chanted prayers over you, symbolizing death to your old life. From that day forward, every hour of your existence belonged to the rule. Some chronicles, such as those preserved in the Benedictine houses of the 11th century, describe novices weeping during their first nights, overwhelmed by the silence and the darkness. Life as a monk revolved around a strict sequence of prayers known as the Divine Office. The bells did not ring merely to mark time, they commanded you. The first bell sounded long before sunrise, often in the deepest hours of the night, calling the community to gather for the night vigil. You stumbled through the dark corridor, guided only by flickering oil lamps and the breath of cold air against your face. From the night vigil to lauds, from terce to sext, from nun to vespers, until finally Compline closed the day, you prayed at intervals that carved the hours into fragments. This toiling rhythm had one purpose, to make sure no monk could ever return to the natural flow of ordinary life. Historical accounts from Cluniac monasteries describe how fatigue pressed like a weight on the chest, yet the brothers rose again and again without hesitation. Discipline replaced sleep. Obedience replaced desire. The rule of silence was absolute. Monks spoke only when necessary, and many monasteries designated entire zones where speech was forbidden. Silence was considered a weapon against temptation and a tool to break the ego. As a monk, you learned to communicate with gestures in the dining hall, a sign for bread, another for water, another for salt. A misplaced gesture could lead to confusion, or worse, correction from your superior. The psychological impact was immense. With no conversation, no laughter, and no idle words, your thoughts had nowhere to escape. Some monks wrote later that silence could feel like standing alone on the edge of a cliff, with only your own conscience staring back at you. The Cistercian houses of the 12th century were especially strict, forbidding all unnecessary speech for months at a time. In the medieval monastery, labor was not merely a duty, it was an act of worship. You rose from prayer benches to fields, orchards, kitchens, workshops, and gardens. The work varied depending on the order. Benedictines cultivated vast estates, while Cistercians cleared remote forests and built entire communities from wilderness. You felt the rough handle of wooden tools, the sting of cold wind across open fields, the ache of your back from bending over soil. Tasks were performed in silence, giving you nothing but the rhythm of your own breath to accompany the hours. Monks copied manuscripts by hand, grinding pigments, stretching parchment, and illuminating sacred texts. It was exhausting and meticulous, but these works preserved knowledge that would otherwise have vanished. Monastic charters from the 10th and 11th centuries record exhaustive inventories of work assignments, all intended to keep the body humble and the mind disciplined. Punishment existed within the cloister, though it differed from secular justice. Discipline focused on humility and obedience. A monk who broke silence, fell asleep during prayer, or mishandled sacred objects might receive fasting, isolation, or public confession. For more serious offenses, the rule described corporal correction. A brother could be ordered to lie face down before the entire community, while the abbot recited psalms of repentance. In rare but documented cases, particularly in early medieval centuries, whipping was used to break a rebellious spirit. Accounts from the monastic reforms of the 9th century mention monks who attempted escape, only to be returned and subjected to harsh penance. Within the walls, obedience was not negotiable. It was sacred law. These measures sought not cruelty, but control. To save the soul, the body had to be humbled. To be a monk was to live simply, and simplicity often bordered on hunger. Meals were limited and carefully regulated. You ate in silence while another brother read aloud from the scriptures, reinforcing the belief that spiritual food mattered more than earthly sustenance. The diet depended on the region, but usually consisted of bread, vegetables, herbs, and occasionally fish. Meat from four-legged animals was forbidden in many orders. During long fast periods, such as the entire season of Lent, the portions grew even smaller and the body weakened. Chroniclers from the Abbey of St. Gall describe fasting so strict that brothers sometimes fainted during prayer. Yet they accepted this as part of their devotion. You ate what the monastery provided, not what your body desired. Hunger, like silence, was another tool of discipline. The scriptorium was both sanctuary and prison. Here, monks bent over wooden desks from sunrise to sunset, copying sacred and classical texts in a slow, methodical rhythm. The air smelled of ink, parchment, and the faint smoke of oil lamps. Your fingers stiffened from cold, while your eyes strained to follow delicate lines of script. Errors were unacceptable. A single misplaced stroke could ruin an entire page of parchment, a material so precious that its loss was considered a serious offense. Some monasteries required the monk to rewrite the full sheet at his own expense, even though he had no worldly wealth. Yet this painstaking work preserved countless manuscripts through centuries of war and decay. Chroniclers from the Abbey of Reichenau wrote of winters so bitter that brothers wrapped their hands in cloth to keep ink flowing across the page. Illness was an inevitable companion. Monastic life demanded physical endurance, but the heavy labor, poor diet, and long nights weakened even the strongest brothers. The infirmary became a place of quiet suffering, tended by monks trained in herbal remedies. You might drink infusions of willow bark for pain, or chew bitter roots to ease fever. Honey, vinegar, and wine were used to clean wounds. Yet the remedies, though earnest, often failed. Without modern medicine, sickness spread quickly through the cloister. Historical records from the 11th century monastery of Monte Cassino describe outbreaks of fever that took dozens of lives within a single season. Even then, monks met death not with fear, but with ritual, gathering around the dying brother to chant psalms as he passed from this world into the next. Night belonged to silence, reflection, and the unknown. Medieval monks believed the hours after sunset were spiritually dangerous, a time when the soul was most vulnerable to temptation. Many monasteries required additional night vigils, pushing the brothers from their beds to stand in cold chapels lit by a single candle. The shadows on the stone walls lengthened, flickering like restless spirits. Many monks recorded visions or frightening dreams during these night hours, interpreting them as divine tests or demonic assaults. The writings of the 12th century Cistercian monk Herbert reveal nights filled with whispered prayers against fear, exhaustion, and the creeping sense of isolation. For you, these hours created a strange tension, darkness that felt both sacred and suffocating. The cloister, an enclosed courtyard surrounded by arched walkways, served as the emotional heart of the monastery. You walked its perimeter countless times each day, tracing the same path as those who came centuries before. The rhythm of footsteps on stone became a form of meditation. The cloister was where monks confronted their inner thoughts, their doubts, and their spiritual burdens. In silence, you felt the weight of the vow you had taken, the vow of stability, promising never to leave these walls. Ancient monastic records describe the cloister walk as a mirror of the spiritual journey itself, a never-ending circle, always returning to the beginning. To live in a medieval monastery meant total submission to the abbot. He was elected by the brothers, yet once chosen, he wielded near absolute authority. His word shaped every aspect of daily life: prayer, work, discipline, study, and even the distribution of food. As a monk, you learned to read the smallest changes in the abbot's expression. A raised brow could mean correction. A quiet nod could mean approval. The rule of Saint Benedict described the abbot as holding the place of the divine within the monastery, an earthly mirror of spiritual authority. Historical accounts from the Abbey of St. Denis tell of abbots who ruled with unmatched wisdom, while others imposed harsh reforms that left the brothers living in fear. Despite the vows, the discipline, and the structure, monks were still human. Temptation did not end at the cloister walls. In many ways, it intensified. The silence magnified every forbidden thought. Hunger sharpened every earthly desire. Exhaustion eroded resolve. Many monastic writings speak of spiritual battles fought in solitude. The desert fathers of earlier centuries described demons whispering in the darkness, while later European monks recorded deep episodes of despair, known as acedia, a spiritual exhaustion that felt like suffocation. You might kneel for hours, struggling against thoughts you could not control, seeking comfort in prayer, but finding only stillness. This inner war was perhaps the greatest burden of monastic life. Despite the hardships, there were moments of profound beauty. Feast days broke the monotony of labor and silence. The brothers gathered in the chapel, their voices lifting in slow, solemn chants that echoed beneath vaulted ceilings. Incense drifted through the air, carrying the scent of resin and smoke. Candlelight shimmered across gold-leaf manuscripts. The liturgy reminded each monk why he had chosen this path, not for comfort, but for transcendence. Chroniclers from the great cathedral monasteries of northern France describe ceremonies so moving that even hardened priests wept behind their hoods. For the medieval monk, ritual was not performance. It was the heartbeat of the cloister. To live as a medieval monk was to surrender everything: your name, your freedom, your desires, and your future. The monastery was both refuge and restraint, shaping the soul through silence, discipline, and relentless structure. This world reveals a profound truth about the human condition. When people believe their actions carry eternal meaning, they will endure hardship beyond imagination. Within the stone walls, the monks sought not comfort, but transformation, willing to reshape their lives in pursuit of the divine. And as the final bell echoes through the cloister, the silence closes once more, carrying their devotion into the distant centuries, untouched by time.